Okay, welcome. Today we have a special guest artist with us, Dr. Russell Jones from the Department of Music, and he is going to talk to you a little bit today about saxophones and the woodwind family. So say hello to Dr. Jones.
Hello. First thing we have to talk about on most all woodwinds except for the flute is how they make a sound. This is a reed, and the reed is cut so that when you put it on a mouthpiece, it will vibrate. The mouthpiece has a flat table, but it curves toward the end, allowing the top part of the reed to vibrate. So we put it on the mouthpiece very carefully, and then we put our lips on the reed at the right place. That's called an embouchure. And we get a sound like that. So this uses a wooden reed, which is part of the reason that woodwinds are called woodwinds. A lot of them were originally made out of wood. This particular one, when the saxophone was one of the later woodwinds invented, it's made out of metal. The shape of the saxophone, I hope you can see this, it starts at the top, it's very small. As it gets down to the bottom, it gets bigger and bigger, so we call that the shape of a cone, even though this particular cone has a couple of bends in it. And that's about it as far as the sound. The vibration is produced by the reed vibrating back and forth on the tip of the reed. Now the range of the saxophone is kind of limited, maybe about 2 octaves and a half. Some of the other woodwinds have an extra octave, but let me demonstrate from low to high. Now notice that when I put a finger down, the pitch goes lower because that makes the instrument longer in effect. If you can see that very well. We get a lot of different sounds on this horn, and the mouthpiece style that you buy makes a difference in that, but also how you conceive of a sound. If I want a real soft sound, probably some of you know that as the Christmas song. If I want a harsher sound, I can relax my embouchure a little more and blow louder. Now I noticed at the end of that last note I did something called vibrato. Vibrato is produced by, it's like a shake in the sound, and we can do it 2 ways. One is by moving our jaw up and down a little like this. And that was kind of a fast vibrato. That style vibrato was popular back in the 20s. Let me play a little tune from back then. So you see a lot of variety of sounds we can get. Let me demonstrate a little more modern vibrato. Notice that that's a lot slower and more relaxed. That's pretty popular use of vibrato on ballads or slow tunes. I can't think of anything else except that this is one of the middle instruments. This they make a couple of smaller instruments, the soprano saxophone, which is usually straight, and they even make a real tiny one called a sopranino. And then larger than the alto saxophone is the tenor saxophone, and then even bigger is the baritone saxophone, and though you almost never see them anymore, they also make a bass saxophone.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
So that covers our saxophone family. There's also another instrument in the woodwind family called a clarinet, which was used in early jazz. Not used very much anymore, but again, was used in early jazz. So to summarize what Dr. Jones was saying, saxophones in order from highest to lowest would be soprano, alto, tenor, and the baritone sax. If you go hear a big band today, you will see all of those instruments being used. And again, we'll have, I do have a link that'll take you to see all those instruments and hopefully to hear all those instruments as well. I try to get as many live demonstrations in this class as possible, but we can't always do that. So I think what we'll do now is segue to the trumpet, which is my instrument here. Okay, so let me grab my trumpet for you. Actually, the first instrument I'm going to show you is an instrument called the cornet. And this particular cornet is called a shepherd's crook cornet because of the shape of this hook, like a shepherd uses to herd sheep. Okay, so this is called a shepherd's crook cornet. The cornet is the same size as the trumpet. So, there we go. We have both of these instruments. There we go, okay? And these are actually the exact same length of tubing. If we were to unroll these two instruments, they would both be 10 feet long of tubing, okay? So this is the modern trumpet, and this is the cornet, okay? The cornet was used in early jazz, okay? So a cornet was used in early jazz, and it was used most popular during the Dixieland era of jazz, okay? So most popular during the Dixieland era. And what we are talking about here is the late 1800s, early 1900s. Some of you may know the name Louis Armstrong, or Pops. This is the kind of instrument that Louis Armstrong started out on, okay? So, let me just play a little bit for you. Okay, so that's how the cornet sounds. What are some ways that the cornet is different than the trumpet? Well, I'm glad you asked. Okay, so once again we have our two instruments, cornet and trumpet. The cornet is a conical bore instrument, which means the size of the tube from the beginning all the way to the end gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You can see it a little bit here. Okay, it starts very small up here at the mouthpiece and then gets larger and larger and larger and larger and larger until we finally get very large at the bell and flares out. Okay, the trumpet does not get larger and larger. It's what we call a cylindrical or a cylinder shape. Okay, so the trumpet starts off, I had it right the first time. The trumpet starts off this size of tubing and really maintains that tubing size all the way through until we get to this part here. And obviously it gets wider and it flares out there. So the cornet is conical, cone-shaped. In other words, the tubing gets larger. The trumpet is a cylinder. The tubing stays the same. So that gives each instrument a unique tone color. So the cornet, as I said, was used in early Dixieland jazz, has more of a mellow sound. That's kind of a mellow sound. If I was to play a similar piece of music on the trumpet, that should have been a little bit brighter. I don't know how the recording quality is coming out on your end. So a little bit brighter. So again, the cornet was used in early Dixieland music. And then around late 1920s, people started to switch to the trumpet, the modern day trumpet. And that's the second instrument I played. And this is the instrument that you're going to hear if you go to any jazz concert that has a trumpet player playing, or a rock concert, or a country music concert that has a trumpeter, okay? Just a regular trumpet, okay? Why was the switch made between cornet and trumpet? I'm not sure. I think really the venues became larger. And so people like Louis Armstrong, who were playing big dances and playing concerts at large venues, they needed to project their sound further. So the trumpet, as we heard, projects a lot further than the cornet. The cornet is more of an intimate sound, conversational sound, where the trumpet has that ability, but also has the ability to project great distances, okay? So I really think the popularity of jazz, the larger venues, the larger concert halls, the drum set was getting larger. All these aspects contributed to I think the transition to the trumpet as opposed to the cornet. Okay, hold on one second. I'm going to go get some mutes. Okay, so I'm going to show you mutes, M-U-T-E-S, okay? Mutes are used by trombonists and trumpeters to change the color of sound coming out of the instrument. Let me see if I can get this video to show you these mutes a little bit better. Okay, there's a couple different mutes right here we have. And then we have this guy here, which is just a regular bathroom plunger. So, mutes change the color of sound. They change the instrument's tone quality. Okay? Mutes also give the composer a different type of sound with which to work. So instead of just having a trumpet like this, we can now put in a mute and change the color. Okay? So I think what I will start with is a cut mute. All right? In French, the word for mute is sourdine, S-O-R-D-I-N-E, sourdine. And when the French want you to use a cut mute, they call it sourdine du bowl. So in other words, a mute with a bowl at the bottom. Okay? This is like a little bowl. Okay, and I put it in, and it should change the sound of the instrument. Okay, so a much different color than so those are, that's the cut mute. Very popular in the swing era and still popular today. Just gives it a slightly softer sound. Okay, then we have something called the Harmon mute. Okay, and it's also called the wah-wah mute. And I'm going to show you why in 1 second. Okay, this mute comes with a stem. All right, and it sounds like this. So kind of a tinny sound. It's used a lot in Broadway musicals. All right. Why did they call it a wah-wah mute? Well, you can put your hand over the stem and make a wah-wah sound. So that's why it's called a wah-wah mute. This mute can also be played without the stem. I can take it out. Miles Davis used this mute a lot on his recordings in the 1950s. So this is called a wah-wah mute or a Harman mute. Again, just another tone color. And then the last mute I brought with me today is a regular bathroom plunger. And this mute was very popular in the big band era, especially with the band of Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington was really one of the first big bands to use plunger mute. Okay? He had a couple great soloists that you would use it. And we can use the plunger mute several ways. We can just go wop, 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 like that. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Okay, so I'm just saying doo-wop, doo-wop, doo-wop. Okay? We can play with it slightly open, like this. I can do a combination. Okay, so lots of different uses for this mute. Another thing I can do as a brass player is make some certain effects with my mouth. In other words, some brass players do a technique called growling, where they go, "Ugh." I'm not too good at that, but it makes it sound a little dirtier. Okay? Another way you can imitate a growl is by flutter tonguing. Just rolling your tongue. And if I do that into my trumpet with this plunger mute, I get this. And that gives me a little bit more of a bluesy sound. Okay? So those are really the three different types of mutes: plunger, cup, and Harman. Okay? These can all be used with the trombone as well. Trombone, another brass instrument that's used. And again, I'll have a link to that instrument. Some of the differences between the trombone and trumpet: the trombone uses a slide. Uses a slide here to change the notes by manipulating a slide. I use valves. Okay? The trombone is a brass instrument, just like the trumpet. We make our sound by just forming our lips like this and blowing air past them. And then and that creates the sound. So that's you've just seen demonstrations of a saxophone, the trumpet, and I'll have a link for you for the trombone as well. Okay, those are the three specific horns that are used in jazz, and I'll see you in our next lecture. Make sure that you are taking notes on all of these lectures as well, okay? And again, I will be posting new lectures every day, so let's not wait to watch them all in one day. Make sure you're scheduling the time for yourself to watch these lectures. Okay, thank you. See you next time.